Next, let's go ahead and take a look at our .module file. I'm going to go ahead and open this. At the very top, we have an opening PHP tag, but if you scroll down to the very bottom of the page, there's no closing PHP tag. The reason for this is that if there is a closing PHP tag and some white space exists after that, like spaces or new lines, then PHP will throw an error, and that can be very hard to track down, especially if you're not familiar with that particular error. So the easiest way around this is to just leave off the ending tag altogether, and PHP will render this page as if an ending tag was at the very end. The next line should look familiar from our .info file. The only difference is the way that this line is commented. So in the .info file, we used a semicolon to indicate a commented line. In our .module file, since we're using PHP, we use 2 forward slashes in order to indicate a comment. And just like with the .info file, this variable will be filled in by the packaging script with information about the creator and the version of this file. Next is a comment block. The first line is a forward slash and 2 stars, and the ending line is a star and another forward slash. And this indicates a Doxygen style comment block. So a normal comment block, you wouldn't need a second star here in the very first line, but by putting that second star, we indicate that here is a particularly formatted comment that can then be used to automatically generate documentation later on. So if you go to api.drupal.org and you navigate through there and look up functions and any information on that site, most of that has been built through this Doxygen system. So if you go to the source code directly, you'll see the same comments that you see on api.drupal.org. Now, by using an @ in file, this says, hey, this is a description about our file. So when we list files in any automatically generated documentation, this is a description for this one. And so I've added a short description that says, demonstrate basic module scaffolding. And then we have our closing comment. Next, we have a function. And you see here it starts about here, ends down here. And this includes some Doxygen commenting as well, right above it. Now this is part of Drupal's coding standards, which we'll go over in detail in another video. But whenever we implement a function that's a hook, we're going to add this type of comment above it. Now I'm going to go over hooks in detail in another video, but just a quick recap of the previous video when we talked about hooks. Hooks are a special type of function that get called by Drupal at particular points during its execution that allow external modules to adjust something before the script continues. So hook menu, this particular hook, allows us to add pages to the Drupal page registry, which means that we can go to a particular URL that we set and see the page that's rendered by a function that we also set. And every page in Drupal is created this way through hook menu. There are a ton of hooks, and like I said, we'll go over these in detail, but hook menu is an essential one for adding some basic pages to your module. For one, and the only page that you see here is the settings page. Now, if your module doesn't need any settings, that's fine, but this will provide a basic structure so that if you do want to allow users of the module to set different configuration options for your module, this is the way to do it. So let's go ahead and look at this line by line. The name of our function is scaffolding_menu, and this follows the convention of the name of our module underscore and the name of the hook. I have a one-line comment here that describes what this menu item is supposed to do. The next line adds an item to the items array. The key for this array, which you see here, admin/settings/scaffolding, is the URL that our page is going to use. And the array that we're passing it is an array of key value pairs that includes information about this page. The first line assigns a title, and the title will display in a default Drupal template as a heading in the very top of the page. And so we're titling this scaffolding. The description is a description of this menu item. I set it to scaffolding configuration. Page callback assigns a function to get called when a user goes to the URL set up here. In this case, it's Drupal get form, which is an internal API function that allows us to render a form through the form API, and we'll cover the form API extensively in a future video. Page arguments allows us to pass particular arguments to the page callback function. In this case, what we're doing is giving it a function name that will return an array for our form. The access arguments line allows us to set permissions that are required in order for a user to view this page. So in this case, it's access administration pages, which is a Drupal core permission that restricts access to administration pages, just as it says. The file line tells Drupal what file to find this function in the page callback line. So we're putting this in a separate file outside of our .module file so that it doesn't get loaded on every page. As I mentioned before, we do this to improve performance so that all of the code with all of the modules aren't loaded on every page load. The file path tells Drupal where to find our file that we set in file. And in this case, we're using a Drupal API function called Drupal get path, which allows us to get a full path regardless of where the user is currently to a particular module or a theme. So we pass it module in the first parameter because we're grabbing the path to a module. And then the second parameter is scaffolding, which is the name of our module. So what this says is that we'll find the scaffolding.admin.inc file wherever the scaffolding module folder is located. And finally, we want to return the items. Now, if you're going through this function from scratch, you're building it from scratch, this is a common line to miss. So if you have added a new page to your module and it's not displaying, it's possible that you miss this line. One other thing that might prevent your page from displaying is if you add the page after the module has been installed. Whenever modules are installed or disabled, basically anytime you submit the module management form or update Drupal, then the page registry gets rebuilt. All the page registry is a database table that includes the path along with the function that gets called when that path is accessed. And the reason why it exists is to improve performance so we don't have to run through every hook menu, and there's a lot of hook menus in Drupal, every time a page loads. Instead, we can just access a single item in the table that the page registry uses and pull that. So if we add a new path to our module and we want that to be functional, what we need to do is clear the cache. So we can do that by going to Configuration, Development, and Performance, and clicking the Clear All Caches button, and this will load it in. Okay, what we're going to do is continue down this file until we get to the end, and then we'll jump back to the function that's being used by this menu path and see how that works. The first thing we see before the function is a Doxygen style comment that says implements hook help. So this is an indicator that we are working with a hook. This hook in particular, hook help, allows us to register help text to display on different pages and to be aggregated in particular ways so that help can be viewed in multiple formats. The way it works is that you set a switch statement or an if-else statement that sets the path that looks for a particular path that's being passed in this first argument, and then returns some text of some kind. So we're using a switch statement which says check out what path is, and then we're setting a couple of different cases. Our first case is for admin/settings/scaffolding, which is the page that we set up in our hook menu function up here. And we're returning some text that says this is some help text for the scaffolding settings page. And we've wrapped this text in a function called t, which allows it to be localized or translatable. We'll go over some of the concepts behind making your interfaces localized in a future video. But almost any time you use plain text or sometimes HTML, you're going to run it through a t function unless you're passing it through a function that is already using the t function. In the case of help, help doesn't run it through a t function, so we're going to do that ourselves. Our next case is for admin/help, and then a hashtag and scaffolding. This is a slightly different structure here, but this path, admin/help, is reserved for our help page. So if we copy this path, and we go back to our Drupal site, and we paste it in, we'll see here that we have a number of links that each correspond to a module, and if we click on the link, it shows us some help text for that particular module. Now, the way we tell the help page that we're adding text for a particular module is by adding it on the other side of a hashtag. And then we return output, again, wrapping our text inside of the t function. In this case, because it's a full page, we'll probably have some HTML involved, so I've wrapped some paragraph tags around this text. Then we would return the output, just like we did in this case. So if we had additional pages that we wanted to add help to, we would go ahead and add it through this method and just add another case.